All right. So you ready?
Yeah. All right.
Okay, awesome.
Obviously, we'll keep this pretty informal for anybody who's been on so far. We've got our video on and everything like that. Definitely want to encourage, keep the conversation community going and chat if you guys have feedback or questions. We'll try and leave some time here at the end. I know I don't have a hard stop. I don't believe you do either, Nichole. Uh,
Hmm.
so if anybody has questions, we'll stick around as long as you have questions for us, as long as there's conversation going. But anyway, we'll go ahead and kick it off. My name's Jason Hubbard. I'm Vice President of Growth at SalesIntel. We have with us Nichole Kelly from Windward. Nichole is one of the leading experts on emotional intelligence in the workplace. So we are all extremely lucky to have her on with us. Most of the time I would have quite a bit to say, but in this case, I'm going to let Nichole largely run with it. So we'll let her talk about how to apply emotional intelligence to your outreach.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you so much. All right, well, let's dive in. So obviously we found ourselves in an interesting time, and what has happened as a community and as a planet and as a global species is that we are navigating a complex set of emotions that are called our survival emotions. This is happening to us, but it's also happening for our customers and our prospects. And it's really important as marketers and salespeople that we understand what our customers and prospects are going through. This particular set of emotions, it's triggered based off our relationship to safety. This is our well-being, our ability to support ourselves. We look at food, shelter, and water are found in your safety emotions. And then another set are coming from your approval triggers. So this is our love and belonging. This is why social isolation is super hard for extroverts, because we're used to interacting with people. So whatever our relationship is to love and belonging and community, we're hitting up against those right now. And then the last is our relationship to control and our ability to control and our inability to control what is happening inside and outside of our homes and our workplaces. I asked a question on the 2019 Emotional Intelligence Study of Marketing Executives, and I asked specifically, how do you respond when someone around you is experiencing a high intensity of emotion? The respondents, we had about 300 marketing executives respond to this study, and they said 61% said they would comfort them, and 39% said that they would help them. Now, the interesting thing about this is that there were four or five other options on this list, and somehow these two rose to the top and actually made up 100%, which I found very interesting in light of all of the other choices that people had. So as a group, when someone is experiencing emotion, our natural tendency is to help them, is to comfort them, is to be there for them and support them. So as we start talking about emotions and as we start diving into this, I want you to understand something, that it takes courage to go into the heart, and it takes courage to be willing to look at emotions in yourselves as well as emotions in others, and be willing to open the door for some of these conversations that really need to happen right now. And understanding not only that the conversation needs to happen, but as sales and marketers, understanding your role in that conversation. There are essentially a couple of planes of emotional user experience design. And I think it's really important to understand where your marketing fits and where your sales conversations fit in this plane of design. On the right end of the spectrum, we have what are considered to be mostly pleasant emotions. Pleasant emotions like happy, elated, alert, excited. And on the lower end of that spectrum, looking at serene and relaxed and calm. They essentially go from either being activated or deactivated, meaning that I'm actually putting energy into them or it's taking no energy from me. And as you start to look at the left end of the spectrum, you'll start to see the unpleasant emotions, right? When you're stressed or you're nervous or you're feeling tense, this is when unpleasant emotions are activated. When they're not activated, you might feel sad, depressed, bored, fatigue. You can see that it's a swell of emotion and it's a lowering of emotion. So if you're designing something, that's really important to look at not only where you fit in this plane, but understand that when you start navigating your way towards unpleasant emotions with your messaging and with what you're putting out, you're actually triggering less predictable emotions in the person that you're talking to. Now, we might be able to say that, yeah, we know as marketers that when we use fear-based messaging to drive tension, because that's ultimately what we're trying to do, we drive tension and then we drive the conversion. When we use that type of messaging, yes, we know that they are more likely to convert. The thing that's interesting, though, is if you start to look at the people who choose to make decisions from these emotional states, you'll find that they tend to be less happy customers. They tend to maybe complain more. It'll be different in every business. However, if you start to look at people who are making those decisions from that place, you'll see that the predictability of those people in their actions is actually less than if you actually look at the pleasant end of the spectrum. So just understand that this is a chart you can use to kind of start looking at where you are today and where you want to be in the future. You're going to fit kind of in one of these 4 quadrants when you start to look at things as a global whole of everything that you're building.
That's a great point on that. Just to jump in is this dovetails with the conversation I was having with my marketing team this week, which is you've got to be careful about what you're optimizing around. So just because you're converting, even if you're converting to paid, does not mean that that's necessarily your best path or tactic. So I was talking to him about, we were doing a review of some of our paid campaigns, and at the surface we were looking at it was like, hey, this is working really well. We're getting a lot of conversions at a much lower price. But then, when we looked at it full cycle and looked at, were they actually converting to paid and what price points were they converting at? It was like, no, actually, we need to put money towards more expensive campaigns that, we get fewer leads out of, but when we do, they're more qualified and they convert at a higher volume or a higher value. So yeah, same kind of story here. You've got to look at it full cycle.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you start to really look at the customer you're developing on the other end of that, and you have an emotional relationship with them. So if you choose to create stress with them, then you're going to choose to create a stressful relationship with them. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. So I wanted to first kind of just give you some from the trenches, how we're actually responding, what's happening inside of our company. And if you don't mind, I'm sorry, my son just woke up from his nap because we're in this new environment. Let me just get my mother to make sure she knows that she needs to get him. 1 second. Hey, Mom.
Great case in point for the new reality.
Okay, thanks. Thank you so much. I appreciate your flexibility and your patience while my son gets his needs met. So I wanted to give you a little bit of perspective about how we're responding as an executive team at Windward. The first is that we've really started to look at agility. We are agile, we're lean, and we're really learning how to find simple, effective, and efficient and effective solutions. Now, this is a methodology that I've been working on for about 15 years, and I've been cycling it through a lot of projects and a lot of clients, and now at these companies. And it focuses on asking some core set of questions so that you can start building without building some huge project that takes months to implement and get approvals and all those kind of things. We simply just don't have that kind of time. So the first thing we do is we ask what the objective is. We define our conditions of satisfaction for meeting that objective. And then I ask myself, what is it that we're trying to learn? How can I measure that we've learned it? And then what can I build in under 2 hours to test it? So I'm looking at building small micro experiments that I can get feedback on, and then I can iterate from there. Once the actual prototype is built, then I ask from the feedback, whether it's data that's my feedback, that is my measure, or if I'm actually getting opinions from people, I ask what really worked, what would make it even better. And then the key here is, what do we want more of and less of? So as you start to look at the emotional experience that people are having on your customer journey, if you're finding that they have a lot of stress, if they're telling you they have a lot of stress, you definitely don't want to be the person that's kind of adding to that stress, right? Just from general kind of looking at the emotions that you want people to feel, but also how they feel about your brand, we don't necessarily want to be contributing on top of that. So I ask what I want more of, what I want less of, and then we iterate, and we're doing this very quickly. Our whole marketing team is, we're using Agile, we do 2-week sprint cycles. So essentially we look at how we can build something and how we can ship it in under a month.
That's great. I mean, we're seeing a lot of the same thing. My background, coming from a growth background, is exactly this type of format. It's rapid iteration, it's testing, it's measuring, it's figuring out what works, what doesn't, and asking the questions for, why did that work? Why did that not? And then using that for, new things to test, new theories to test. And yeah, I mean, coming at an issue or a problem like we're currently in with that sort of a background and structure to it has been a huge advantage for us so far.
Yeah, exactly. We've been able to like really respond rapidly, and because we're agile, it's not like we can't pull things off of like we're doing sprint planning at the end of today. And when if we're halfway through a project, we may decide to put that project back in the backlog and pull something else in and move it forward because in that last 2 weeks something has shifted. So we just have to know that and be really flexible and know that we're going to put energy out that isn't necessarily going to return the thing that we want. If we build 5 things, we're hoping that 2 are going to work. And that's kind of the methodology that we've been using that's been working really, really well for us. So I wanted to talk about how to build emotional intelligence and build resilience. So as you look at emotional intelligence, it's, the definition of emotional intelligence basically says that you know what emotion you're feeling and you can recognize the emotions in others. And at the point of mastery, you can not only recognize the emotions in others, but you can actually use those cues in order to build relationships with them. And when we start looking at emotional resilience, this is your ability to actually navigate the entire emotional spectrum and to do it without getting caught in the emotion. When we start to really open ourselves to feeling emotion and having the courage to dive into some of these, less pleasant emotions so we actually understand them, what you end up finding is that an emotion actually only takes 90 seconds to feel. And this came from Jill Bolt Taylor's TED Talk, where she talked about the stroke that she had and that, the science of this is that 90 seconds to feel an emotion. And yet many times what ends up happening is we feel an emotion and then we keep repeating that emotion. They're just walking downstairs now. We play the story in our mind that continues to repeat that story and then build that emotion back up for us over and over and over again. Have you experienced that, Jason?
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely, I'm trying to remember who it was I was reading. It was probably one of Malcolm Gladwell's books. He was talking about how much of this, we react to before we even have a chance to process it, and then how much of that is a story we go back and tell ourselves after the fact. And so, it works at 2 different levels. One, you have to be cognizant of the emotions and how quickly they come into effect. But you also have to know the give and take there between what's going on the rational side, where we're trying to rationalize and understand the emotions, and the impact that can have on how we process those. And so you have the immediate response, which is largely uncontrollable, but then you have the secondary level of it. How do you think about it? How do you process it?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I'm having a little, there we go. My slides are jumping all over the place. Okay, so thank you so much for adding that. So as we start to look at how you respond to emotions and how you actually build your emotional intelligence, there's kind of these 2 steps, as I talked about. There's the awareness step, which is to know what you're feeling. And then there's the empathy step, which is to be able to put yourself into someone else's shoes. So putting yourself into someone else's shoes doesn't mean that if somebody else is feeling upset, that you join them in feeling upset. It means that you recognize they're feeling upset. You can certainly respond and be there for them, but it doesn't mean that you're actually joining them in that emotion. There are essentially 5 steps that I've found to increase your emotional intelligence and start to build emotional resilience, which means that we're willing to dive into some of these less pleasant emotions so we can understand them as a community. Especially as a community that uses these emotions in storytelling, it's really important for us to have a personal relationship with these emotions and be willing to feel them. So the first thing, I'm going to walk you through this exercise. This is something that you're going to have to do on your own time, but you can absolutely do this after this webinar, and I'm telling you, it will change your life. It's changed mine. I've been doing this for 3 years. I've been recording what I call a mirror conversation, where I stand in front of the mirror and I actually practice this with myself. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to do what you need to do to get some privacy and grab your journal and pen. You're going to go to your bathroom, go inside, lock the door, and stand in front of your mirror. So do whatever you need to do in order to get some privacy. Then what I want you to do is I want you to hold up your phone's video camera so that you can actually see your reflection in the mirror and press record. Now, this isn't necessarily something you're going to publish. You don't have to publish them like I do, but it is something that's for you. So go ahead and press record and know that it's just for you. And then I want you to follow these instructions. You're going to look in the mirror and you're going to see how you feel. This is a powerful exercise so you can start to see your own responses, your own emotions, and exactly what your body does, how you respond, how your voice changes, all of these things as you're actually looking in the mirror. So the first one that you're going to do is happy. You're going to tell you what, man, my dog is like at the door freaking out. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to look in the mirror and you're going to think of a happy story, something that makes you really happy, something that brings joy into your life. And you're going to notice what happens in the mirror. Then you're going to feel grateful. You're going to tell yourself something that makes you really grateful. Right now, I'm very grateful for my son, even though he is still trying to balance waking up from his nap. He's like 19 months and transitions are tough.
They are.
Then you're going to go through love, and then you'll start moving your way into the lower end of the spectrum. So stress, anger, grief, and fear, you're going to walk through that process. Now, there's one thing that's really important that when you do this, I've built in a triple reward system for you. So when you start to get to where you've done love, I want you to go and I want you to feel stress. And I want you to think about something that really stresses you out. And if you don't have anything that stresses you out, then I want you to think about one of your friends who has something that stresses them out, because there's this really interesting thing that when someone else feels something, you can feel it too. It's actually something, I believe it's tied into our mirror neurons. Just like when you see in the movies, somebody gets hurt and then you're like, you can kind of feel it. It's very similar with emotions. So use your own story, use someone else's story. After you've done that, I then want you to go back up through the list. So you're going to go back to happy, back to grateful, and back to love. And then you can move forward to anger. And then you're going to go back to happy, back to grateful, back to love. Then you move forward to grief, and you repeat that process until you move through the entire list. This is what I call cleansing your palate, your emotional palate. And the reason that you want to do this is because when you start to feel these emotions, they have, once you feel it, sometimes have you ever had an emotion and then it's hard to kind of reset and get back to a happy place? Or maybe you interact with someone in a meeting and, they're in a bad mood, and then you notice that you're in a bad mood. And it's like, wait a second, just an hour ago, I wasn't even in a bad mood. Well, it's because you haven't cleansed your emotional palate. You're still carrying those emotions. And this makes this exercise something that could feel very unpleasant, because you're going to actually dive into these deeper emotions, but you're going to give yourself a triple reward for doing it. So at the end, you're going to feel really good, and you're going to learn how you actually respond to these emotions. The last step is you're going to actually stop recording, and then you watch the video. So you can watch this video once, you can watch it twice, you can watch it 1,000,000 times, how many ever times you want, how many ever times it's giving you value. And you can do this repeatedly, and you can do it with multiple emotions. So go through the process one time, but I encourage you, after you've watched that video and you start to understand how you look when you have these emotions, what I have found is that then you actually know what your body feels like when it's in fear versus when it's in stress. These are very different emotions, but they often get confused because we usually walk from stress into fear. But if we walk from stress into joy and gratitude and happiness, and then we walk into fear, we will notice the subtle differences between each of these emotions. And that's where you start to be able to actually get to a point of mastery of your own emotions. As I like to use this quote, because it's just one of my favorites, at the end of the day, people won't remember what you said or did. They will remember how you made them feel. And I use this as a collective. They will remember how we made them feel. As a marketing and a sales community right now, we are on the front lines of how people feel. We're telling the story, we're crafting the story, we control the media headlines, we control the advertising channels, we control the blog posts, we control the message of what's happening in our world right now. And it's really important that we take notice of how we are making people feel. Recently, my family went through a trauma, and my son was involved in a mass shooting, and his best friend passed away. As I was dealing with this, and I had to, drive down to his school. They were both freshmen in college. I drove down to the school, and I really was trying to figure out, how do I help and be supportive to everyone who's going through this trauma right now? And how do I also make sure that my needs are met? Because obviously, I'm going through a loss just as everyone else is. And I found and happened across, and I have no idea what the source was. It was called a crisis circle. And I've labeled this the trauma communication circle. And what's important here is that at the center of this crisis, if we want to call it a trauma, if we want to call it a crisis, I call it an opportunity. At the center of this opportunity is your prospect or your customer. In the next ring is their family. In the next ring is their colleagues and their friends. And in the last ring is you. You are on the outside of this communication circle. And it's very important to understand your role in this circle. Your role is to never dump in, which means that we don't share the less pleasant emotions through the in of this circle. The prospect or customer, they can share out. They can talk to their family about how stressed they're feeling. They can talk to their colleagues and their friends about how stressed they're feeling. They can talk to you about how stressed they're feeling. But your role is to help them and show them that there is a pleasant end of the spectrum, not to dive into the deep end with them. And this takes practice. It takes a lot of practice, to be honest, because we have to learn our role and then we have to practice it to make sure that we actually follow it. Don't dump in. Your circle is where you can dump, right? Your circle, you're at the center, and you can talk to your family, and you can talk to your colleagues and your friends, and then you can talk to, the advertisers who are talking to you and the marketers who are talking to you. But we just need to understand that our prospects and our customers are at the center of this, and it is our job to be a servant to them, not to add to the crisis.
I think it's a great point. I mean, some of the biggest fails that I've seen in the current stuff that's going on have been people that have violated that. Where they've tried to dump in, and and that's what most people start talking about as tone deaf, their approach to it. And that's always a problem, and you always see backlash for it. But so much more so during times like this.
Yeah, and it's like, you get it, right? Because ultimately people aren't trying to offend others. They're not trying to be insensitive. We just all have something that's top of mind for us. And so as marketers and salespeople, look, I was part of the ROI revolution. I wrote the book, How to Measure Social Media, and I built an entire case for return on investment. We all understand that return on investment is really important. We understand that sales are important, and we don't have to jump into the deep end with our customers in order to get it. And so I have some tips, and I'll show you how we're doing this in an effort just to help and support and to show you that there are other ways to communicate. And it doesn't have to, when we're conscious of emotions and we're conscious of the emotions, the emotional impression we're leaving, there's a whole nother level of ROI. And this is where we start to get into loyalty. This is where we start to get into influence. And this is where we start to actually have people who are ambassadors of our brands.
Yeah, just
so,
to throw in one other thing. I mean, I used to be a doctoral candidate in philosophy, so I taught business ethics. And there's the distinction and sort of conflict between a stakeholder and stockholder theory of business, who you're ultimately answering to. And I always tried to teach my classes that I thought that dichotomy was a false dichotomy. And I pointed to all kinds of examples where trying to strictly follow the stockholder model, trying to maximize return, and the whole ROI model that you were talking about, oftentimes backfired. And the reverse oftentimes was true. People were not able to clearly map ahead of time how this was going to contribute to revenue, but they did the right thing. Trying to serve all the different stakeholders, and in the end it wound up helping the bottom line. And so a lot of times it really boils down to doing what is right, what's going to connect and what's going to be supportive, and then having the faith that those things are going to work out.
Yeah, absolutely. And that, sometimes the best, I don't know, Jason, if you've experienced this, but sometimes the best campaigns are never what you think they're going to be. Like we all know that ugly direct mail performs best. It just does. Like, a beautiful direct mail piece, it just doesn't perform. But if I send you a letter that looks like it might be a bill or a check or something like that, you open it. So understanding that and understanding like what works and what doesn't work. And then also how you can kind of, I like to say, ride the wave, where you can see that something is working a little bit, and then I'm going to go more into it. I might double down on it, but my double down isn't going to be a huge piece of my budget. My double down is going to be the second level of that experiment. And when you can do that, then you can start to see oh, we're getting a negative response from this. Okay, but it's only 100 people we sent it to, or it's only 1,000 people versus our entire database. Little things like that make a big difference when you're navigating, very agile times. Like these are agile times. If we have to be agile in order to respond, and to respond from a place that is really honorable to our customers and our prospects. And I think that honor right now from a marketing perspective is something that we don't talk about a lot. We talk about integrity. I really am looking at how we can be honorable to our prospects and our customers. And this tip goes right in line with that, which is to avoid emotional projection and dumping, as we talked about. The thing is that when you start using language like, we understand your fear, well, you understand your fear, but you don't understand my fear. I come from a totally different place. I've had an entirely different background. So it's actually not true that you understand my fear. You understand your fear and your story of fear. So when you start saying, I understand your fear, what you're actually doing is you trigger fear in that person because you've said the word fear. It's like, you say fear, I feel fear. You say happiness, I can connect to happiness. So understanding that using the lower spectrum and the less pleasant emotions in your marketing copy actually will create them. You must be feeling like, insert here. You must be feeling stressed. You must be feeling anxiety. I've seen this in marketing copy over and over again. Well, guess what? You're creating stress and anxiety in your prospect and your customer, or you're attracting people who feel that to be your customers, and to people who make decisions from that place to be your customers. We know how you feel. I've been feeling like this. This is when you start talking about, here's how I've been feeling. Now you're dumping in on your prospect, right? How you've been feeling, like if you're in a close relationship with your prospect, that's a little different. You're in a one-on-one conversation, but saying I've been feeling like that to a prospect, or I've been feeling stress, or I've been feeling anxiety, or I've been feeling scared, or any of those kind of things. Again, you start creating that because it's like a mirror neuron back to your prospect. What you say is how they're going to feel. Some phrases that I recommend avoiding, and I will say first right here, I have said all of these phrases, all of them, 100% of them, and I'm starting to notice that marketers are all starting to use them. I believe that there is a time where you have a very short window to use phrases before it becomes, cliche. And these are starting to become not only cliche, they're starting to become, as you mentioned, where it's a little distasteful to start interjecting coronavirus and COVID-19 into your marketing communications. And I'm seeing this everywhere. Like I said, I've done this as well. We sent out a COVID-19 update to our customers, and we sent it to our customers because our projects, are affected by this, and they needed to know what our policies were because we have staff on site. So for us, it was important to have a COVID-19 communication around that, but then that's it. On our software company side, we chose not to do that because our software has nothing to do, like there's no dependency of you on our software in this and what's happening. So we chose not to do it in that situation. When you say things like we're in this together, it's like I said, everybody's saying this right now. And so it's kind of starting to get the like, okay, yeah, we're all in this together, but you're actually taking these words of we're in this together. And because marketers are putting money behind it and now it's in advertising, now it feels like we're less together, actually. Because now it's become a gimmick that people are using to get me to buy something. So we're actually harming the effect of these words by putting advertising behind it. New normal, again, everybody's using new normal, but it's kind of like clickbait at this point. Unblank times, unprecedented times, uncertain times, on whatever words you want to use times. We're not in untimes, we're in agile times. When you put uncertainty into people's mind, they're going to have uncertainty about your product too, so like, remember, you create what you say. Stay safe implies that we're not safe. It sounds like you're saying something positive, but you're actually implying that we're not safe right now. So you trigger people's fear emotions when you say things like that. So I just recommend, challenging yourself to avoid using these terms, avoid talking about coronavirus, allow your marketing and your sales conversations to be a safe place that isn't filled with coronavirus messaging, because we already know it's happening. We don't need you to tell us it's happening. We know it's happening. So just allow it to happen and be the person who doesn't need to talk about it right now.
Yeah, it's a great example of how marketing in general, but especially during times like this that are so rapidly changing, that it's always a shifting landscape.
Yeah.
I mean, at first, like the first week or so that, everybody was just starting to be affected by this, two of our best pieces of content were directly talking about it. But the key to that was before everybody was talking about it. It was at a time when everybody was just trying to get their arms around what was going on. And it was structured as, hey, here's some advice on how to handle, like specifically when all of our, business events were being canceled. Like, what do you do in that case?
Right.
Now people have had like, a month and a half to try and contemplate that and read, articles and stuff like that. And so, if you're putting out something new or trying to promote something along those lines now, it's stale and you're coming off as following or trying to capitalize
Right.
on. And so, the exact same piece of content, the exact same messaging, done 6 weeks ago versus now are going to be completely different.
Right. And I love how you talk about, being the leader versus the follower. You'll know when you're following at this point because now everyone is doing it. So it is a very short window. It's like I did a bunch of LinkedIn outreach, and we put 100 salespeople on LinkedIn doing outreach before it was a cool thing. And then literally now, like, everybody does that. And now I don't do that anymore because now it's overplayed. So just understanding the market and understanding where you fit in the market, and using this as an opportunity to not only challenge yourself to not use this as an opportunity to generate business, or even as an opportunity to build relationships. Like, let's not use this situation as an opportunity. Instead, let's actually just be there for our customers and our prospects. So some, I call them no BS tests to run your copy through. I'm known for no BS marketing and telling you like it is. And these are some questions that I ask when I'm writing copy. And I love writing copy. It's actually one of my favorite things to do. So I do write right now I'm writing all of our emails and all of our landing pages. So am I using tension or fear to drive the conversion, right? So tension means I've identified a problem and I've identified a solution. Fear means I've identified there's a problem, and if you don't solve it, there's going to be a deeper repercussion if you don't solve the problem. So just understanding the difference between tension and fear, it's subtle. It's really subtle. But when you start to play with your own emotions and you start to understand these, you'll feel that subtlety. And when you read your copy, you'll be able to feel the emotions that you're leaving behind. And when you feel that you're leaving fear behind, you can switch and you can say, okay, I know I need to build tension, because tension is what drives the conversion, but I don't need to do it this way. Did I do my best to leave the person feeling better than when they got here? Now, again, this isn't making them feel bad and then switching to make them feel good. This means that, hey, no matter what state you came in, my intention was to be the bright spot in your day. I chose to be inspirational. I chose to be motivational. I chose in writing this copy to leave someone feeling better. If they came in and they were not feeling good, I hope that they're going to feel better after they read this. And then the last one, and this was one that, kind of can draw some emotions for people, is would I say this to someone who's suicidal? And this is a test that I run all of my copy through for a variety of reasons. The first being that in the marketing community in particular, and I do a lot of writing for marketers, we have many people inside of our community that have depression, that have suicidal depression. And in times like now, as we're starting to navigate survival emotions, guess what? People are experiencing their addictions and they are experiencing their areas of growth in a higher level of intensity than they ever have. So if there was ever a time where someone might be suicidal, now is that time. So we need to be hypersensitive to ensuring that if we were writing something that was a fear message before, and we asked ourselves, like, if I was sitting on the brink of not wanting to live anymore, could this push me over the edge? Knowing that it's like a hair that can push someone over the edge. It's just, you need to just be more cognizant of the actual emotions that people are in. And if you read that and it's like, oh yeah, I would totally say this to somebody who was in a low place right now, then you're good. But if it makes you feel uncomfortable, then that's a good idea to change the copy. And like I said, this is very subtle. If it makes you feel uncomfortable at all, if you have to think it through and justify it, it's probably best to change the copy.
Nichole, real quick, before or we're running a little bit over, so for anybody that needs to jump, We are recording the webinar. We'll send out a link to the recording in the deck. So for anybody that needs to run, don't worry. We'll get you everything so you won't miss anything. And then for anybody else that can stick around, great. We'll love to have you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I hope you watch the replay because I'm about to go through a bunch of examples. So I know some people ask for some email examples. I actually have an email example. Look at that. So another one is to consider how your user experience can be optimized for heightened sensitivity to emotional triggers. So this is an example of Nava Health and Vitality Center. It's a company that's here in Maryland. And you know, when we start to look at like transgender communities and people's relationship with gender, this is an area that may not be sensitive to you, but is very sensitive to some other people. And so as a result of that, like this is a really good example of just showing sensitivity, right? Like we know that there are people who choose not to identify as female and male. And so we're going to offer just one alternative for them to prefer not to say, or that it's other. And at a time like this, somebody sees something like this and it's like, wow, like that person, I feel seen. I feel like they understand me because they knew that I didn't want to check one of those two boxes. So let's talk about doing this in action. So like, how do you actually apply all of this? What does it actually look like? So from our company's perspective, what we've done is we've really shifted into a servant leadership approach, and we've pulled in all of our leverage. So as I mentioned, I'm the Vice President of Marketing for Windward Consulting Group, but I'm also the Vice President of Marketing for Red Monocle. And both of these companies are owned by the same CEO, and we have kind of a portfolio of companies. So as a result of that, what we've done two things. One, we've combined forces because we provide different services. Red Monocle is a software company that helps IT departments rationalize their tools and find savings, whereas Windward is a consulting group that comes in and actually helps implement software solutions and things like that. So what we did is we combined forces. We're going out to market together for the first time ever in the history of these two companies. And we're offering to save people money. So we're not charging anything for this. We're saying, hey, this solution that we have, actually, we guarantee it'll save you $1 million if you're spending more than $10 million a year on tools. And we're just going to give it to you. And we're going to give you a report because we know that if we help you right now, that means that maybe you could actually save someone's job. So in this case, this is the way that we've done it, but look at your own and say, how can we be a servant to our community and what can we give them for free? What could we gift right now? Gifting is we've entered this new gift economy. I don't know if you've noticed, but there's a lot of gifting going on. So what can we gift and how can we gift in a way that's unique? Because now that is also becoming a little bit of a follower thing to do. Look at how your offer can be very unique. The other thing we're doing is adding a lighthearted value add approach. So I actually am sending out a campaign. This campaign goes out tomorrow. And I'm asking, I'm doing blog posts where we're bringing in and having a roundup of feedback from people on what's going on. And the first one that we did is, let's get real. What did you panic buy? We could have asked any question. We could have said like, what are you doing with your IT tools portfolio? But instead it's like, yeah, we understand that we need a little bit of lightheartedness right now. We need something to laugh at. That's why John Krasinski's, good news is doing so well, is because we were looking for some good news. So I asked what you panic bought, and then I tell you the story about how I panic bought 6 pounds of green beans in one can. And if you're wondering, like, does this stuff actually work? Well, I have done this before. Using emotional intelligence, building community, meeting people in a place of emotion where they aren't normally used to sharing. And we built a community at Care One Debt Relief Services when I was there. The community actually existed. And when I came in, we started doing some different things. We involved the community. We had our people who were in debt actually become our customers, become our bloggers. And what we ended up finding is that just having that community feel and that love and belonging, we talked about the approval trigger. When we became the community and we offer the community for people, we saw over 600% improvements, not only in customer acquisition, but also in retention. So there's a couple of things just to kind of summarize here that you can do to earn your EQ merit badges, as I like to call them. The first is that you want to design for the emotional relationship you want. You want to leave the audience better off, and then you want to measure the ROI and the effect of your marketing, which is your return on emotion. So as you start to really design for emotional experiences, what happens to your return on investment and what also happens in that customer experience. And ultimately, you get to decide, do you want happy or unhappy prospects and customers? With that, that's all I have, Jason.
That's great. So we have several questions over here. Most of them were kind of specific to outreach. So we have one, example of good emotional intelligence in an outreach email.
Yep, that I can share. This is my example on that one. So here you can see, like, I'll read this to you so you can kind of get an idea of what the wording is. Hi there, I'm Nichole Kelly. I'm currently putting together an article focused on how the IT community has responded to the COVID-19 crisis. I broke my own rule. This was written prior to writing the rule, as I said. And I was wondering if you'd be interested in participating. I wanted to start the series out on a lighthearted note because, let's be honest, we could all use a good laugh right now. Today's topic is Let's Get Real. What did you panic buy? I realize you might be wondering, what exactly constitutes a panic buy? Allow me to demonstrate. I wouldn't call myself a lover of green beans, yet when walking down the Costco aisle with lockdown looming, I was filled with excitement when my eyes spied a little green 102-ounce can of green beans, to be specific. So I'm just telling a story, and then at the end I say, what did you panic buy?
No, that's great. I mean, I think that's a good case in point where a lot of people have questions on, what do you do if you're not saying, like, I get it, I understand, and this is a great example of how you can go about it, where you instead of trying to say you're in their shoes, you give them something personal from your side that they will hopefully be able to identify and empathize with, without having to explicitly say, like, I get it.
Yeah. And I'm like talking about, I'm like, here's my experience. And then I say, what was your experience? Versus like, are you having the same experience that I am? I'm almost 100% sure no one on our email list has also bought a 6-pound can of green beans. But if someone replies and says they have, I'm like gonna share recipes or something with that person.
All right, so this one was specific to the stay safe, do not do thing. They were asking as an alternative something like, "I hope you and your family are doing well." What's your take on that?
It's a really interesting thing because it's very subtle, because I try not to use the word hope either, because it's, when I say I hope, I'm putting out a wish for you, and I try not to wish for other people in general. So, I might say something like, I'm wishing you and your family all the best. I would just leave it off, to be honest. So what I've been doing is when I run into resistance and conflict, it's like, is it going to add value to the communication piece? So I would stop and I would say, what's your objective that you're trying to say there? Are you trying to connect with them? Are you just trying to close out the email? Because you could just as easily say, thank you for your time, to close out the email and actually show gratitude in response.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great case in point. Oftentimes when we're trying to figure out, what's motivating that a lot of times is that kind of fast follow thing. We see everybody else doing something that we haven't done in the past, and we feel like we need to do it. Mm-hmm. And then we struggle. How do we make it our own? And oftentimes that struggle is a good indicator that we may not want to be doing it at all.
Right.
But
and also, like, looking at who's trying to receive something from that piece of communication. Are you trying to receive something from the communication? Does it make you feel better to like connect with them on that emotional level and say, I hope you and your family are doing well? I totally understand why you want to say it, but understand that our relationship is a business relationship. So my family really has nothing to do with our relationship. If we were on a one-to-one relationship, then absolutely you want to have a conversation about, hey, how's your family? And we, in fact, went out to all of our customers. The first thing we did when this happened was we sent out an email and said, hi, I'm reaching out to say, how are you? Do you have everything you need? How can I help? That was our first email out. And we got people replying saying, here's what I need. Here's how you can help. Thank you so much for reaching out. That was our very first communication. Notice we didn't say, do you need this from me? It was just simply flat questions. How can I help? And when you respond that way, in that situation, I might just say, is there anything I can do to help you?
Yeah, and I think that's key, is having it be open-ended, but also with the expectation that if they've got a way to actually reply. Like, if you say that from an email address that's not monitored, without some way, explicitly in there for them to actually reply to that, that's going to get your attention. Then yeah, I mean, that rings about as empty as it probably is. And case in point, most of the I mean, I can say probably every one of those business sentiments that have been sent. Stay safe. Hope that you're well. Whatever. Like, none of them made me feel safer, and none of them made me feel like anybody particularly even cares. It's just like,
right.
This is our new way we sign off. And yeah,
I think it comes down to like intimacy, right? Like some of these things are intimate things to be saying, and it feels like you're almost like coming into my private, intimate space when you start talking about my family, when you start, talking about my feelings and, things like that. So, and normally this might not even be something that anybody would talk about because we wouldn't even notice because we're so busy just zooming through life. But in this time, it's like when our emotions are already heightened and we're specifically in our survival emotions, like, when you start to really study emotional intelligence, you find that the survival emotions are also the same emotions that do things like trigger PTSD, they trigger depression, they trigger the lower end of the spectrum because there's uncertainty, as we've talked about. So if you understand that, then speak to someone, as we might say, like, how we, like, for whatever reason as an industry, write for 6th grade reading levels, even though like our country very much reads well above that reading level. I like to say, let's start designing for, 6th grade emotional levels, because actually that is more closer to where we are emotionally than our reading levels.
Yeah, and I think something we're probably going to see from a lot of people. We talk about things to avoid. I think one of the things that we pointed out in here that does work. It's like the story that you told and the panic buying piece. So try not to project that hey, I get this, or say like I understand this, or whatever. Say personally what you've dealt with, and then let them project into that, as opposed to you trying to project out. Back to the case in point for us about the canceled events. I think that worked well for us, not because we tried to say like, hey, I get it, or I understand. We came at it from like, hey, this was the very first thing we were impacted by. We had a half dozen events we had spent the last 2 months trying to gear up for and get marketing ready for, and had travel booked for, and our entire lead generation, plan for the next 2 quarters was around this. And then we had all of our events canceled. And then we took it to the next level. Like, not only did that impact us, but here's X, Y, and Z that we did to try and adjust strategy, make the most of, and course correct off of that.
Right.
And I think at the end of the day, that's probably why that campaign connected so well. Was I wish I could sit and say like I knew that and that was how I was trying to go about it. But I think I think the more you practice emotional intelligence, the more that just happens naturally, as opposed to having to sit and think about it and look at it. Am I doing it the right way? Because we certainly didn't do that. I think we just sort of fell into it, and it was because that's just sort of the way we try and do things in general.
Yeah. And like, we're all going to bump up against these. Like 100% of us are going to bump up against these. Christina, I wanted to just dive in a little bit deeper in terms of the example. So when we say we understand your fear, another alternative might just be to say something like, we want to be here to support you. Like, say what it is you actually want. We would like to support you. Is there anything we can do to help? Or I would use support. So like, we would be here we want to support you. We want to help, something like that, showing what your desire is versus assuming what the other end is, what they're feeling and things like that. Yeah. Rick says, stay strong, stay hopeful, in his email signature. I would just avoid it right now. I would just avoid it right now, because there's 99% of people who would have no problem with that, but there's the 1% who's going to be like, are you implying that I'm not strong? Are you implying that I'm not hopeful? Are you implying that I'm not safe? I am all of those things. So if I am all those things, then it doesn't need to be said at all.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, what I'm hearing more and more, pretty much on a daily basis is, all of these things that we sort of started doing because of this, whether
Mhm.
it's talking about COVID, whether it's talking about staying safe, whether it's talking about, whatever, most people are getting to a critical mass with it where they're so sick of it. Um,
Mhm.
and everybody's kind of, they're past the phase of like, the sky's falling, oh my God, life is ending, and now
Mhm.
everybody's sort of shifting focus. What do I do to move on? What do I do
Yeah.
to, and so anything that's kind of dragging them back into that mindset, they
Right.
have a visceral reaction to right now.
Yeah, we want to move forward. I'll be honest, Rick. What I say is keep rocking your flavor of awesome.
There you go. All right. Well, if anybody has anything else burning, we'll let you drop that in. But otherwise, thanks everybody for joining us today. And Nichole, thank you especially. This has been fantastic.
Yes, thank you so much. And thank you all for your patience with my son waking up and going through all of that. It was like one of those things where I was looking at the time of it and I was like, this could be really easy, or he could wake up at right at. So I appreciate all of your patience and understanding, and wish you all the best. And I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Facebook is my primary channel. If you want to, connect with me and ask questions there, I'm here, I'm available. My goal is really to help serve the marketing community, because I think that we have an important mission right now, and we actually have a role to play that's very important for the world. And it's to tell the story of how we do get through this. We are going to create that narrative, because we are the social conditioning engine, and it works. Like, we can see it, we can see that this engine works. So let's use it consciously and use it to actually help people and motivate them and inspire them, because there is life after COVID-19.
Yep.
We will move past this. The economy will recover, business will bounce back. We know this. We've been through 9/11, we've been through the 2008 recession. Some of us were part of the dot-com boom. As leaders, we've done this before. So use the skills that you've practiced through those other experiences and allow them to make you an even stronger leader, return an even stronger company with even stronger customers and even stronger prospects. And we are in this together ultimately. So let's just be in it together versus talk about being in it together.
Exactly. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All
Have a
right.
great day, everyone.
Thanks, Sarah.